world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's broadcast. It is September 23rd, 2011. It is the Sunday edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. And I have a bunch of stuff I want to get into. I have guests coming up all week, Wednesday, Friday, and next Sunday. So today, I'm lucky that I have 2 hours to play some stuff for you. And I want to cover a few things. And since I actually have the time to go into it, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the latest, I guess you could say, updates on Fast and Furious. I don't want to say it's over, but I guess the government's official investigation into it is over. We'll find out if anything comes out of this further, but I highly doubt it. The other day, I'm sure you're all aware of by now that the government came out with I think it was inside the Justice Department, but it was the Inspector General of the Justice Department, and I think he was giving it was just a report, but pretty much Eric Holder was not blamed. And there were a few people that were blamed inside ATF. Of course, I think one of them resigned, if I remember correctly, even maybe more than one, but I know definitely one resigned. And, some of these guys are going to get slaps on the wrist, a bad boy, you're a bad boy, go sit in the corner for 5 minutes, and then they'll end up getting a raise on the back end that you won't even know about, or a promotion. Same thing happened with 9/11. The people that should have been held accountable, if it was a quote-unquote failure, right? If it was just ineptitude and a large failure, the people that would have and should have been held accountable weren't held accountable at all. They were given raises and, the proverbial slap on the wrist. So this report comes out, and it says that, in a nutshell, it's not Eric Holder's fault. He wasn't involved in it, which is a lie. I don't know how he could call himself the Attorney General. You're in charge of everything, but you don't know what's going on, and it's not really your fault. It's people below you's fault. It's my lackey's fault. It's never my fault. In the military, when even an E2 or an E3 screws up, or even an E1, the captain of in my case, I was on board a ship. And then I was on board a land unit too. But when I was on board the ship, if one of our guys screwed up, even down to a lowly E2, okay, If an E2 screwed something up real bad, the captain would be held accountable for it. It's his ship. Not even the XO. Not the executive officer, not the second in command, the captain. Go look up how many captains are removed from their command, relieved of their command of their ships in the course of a year in the Navy and in the Coast Guard. Happens a lot. Even if it's something that's not their fault, it's still considered their fault because they are the captain. Eric Holder is the Attorney General. He's in charge of the DOJ. He's in charge of the ATF. He's supposed to have a lid on this. So again, what they're saying is the government is inept. No, there's no evil intent whatsoever. The government's just inept. Such lies. Lies. And what I find real interesting about this, not only is the agent Brian Terry, the Border Patrol guy that was killed, his family's pissed. Okay, but not only, now I expected that, but that's not what I find really interesting. What I find really interesting is Arizona Sheriff, okay, Larry Deaver, 60, dies in a single car wreck. Now, this is one of the guys that was, he was defending Arizona's illegal anti-immigration law. He was out there, one of the people, he was against the government not enforcing it. He was one of these sheriffs that stood up. And this guy dies a couple days in a single car accident right before this release came out. Now, I'm not saying that the two are connected. I'm not trying to draw a connection because you're dealing with Fast and Furious and you're dealing with the border problem, and this was a stand-up sheriff. But I just have to wonder, is it a coincidence that this guy he wanted the government to shut the border, down to illegal immigrants and all that, more so for the drug cartels coming across. Everybody, the illegal immigration thing is, that causes problems, but that's more of a red herring. The big problem is the fact that a lot of them are used as mules to bring drugs back and forth, and then there is suffering from the people that they get used and abused. But I just find it suspect that this guy, this sheriff, who wanted the government to enforce its borders, I'm sure he was up as to what was going on with Fast and Furious. I'm sure he knew what was going on. He's a sheriff, after all. I'm sure if he was awake enough to stand up to the feds. I just find it interesting that he dies in a single car accident. And then there was a quick little article on Fox News, which I actually just posted on Federal Jack a little while ago as an archive so it wouldn't disappear. But I really haven't seen much anything else about this guy. Larry Deaver, Arizona Sheriff. Just a little weird that he dies. I'm not saying I don't have any evidence that there's a definite connection. I'm not coming out and saying, oh my God. I'm not on my desk with a bullhorn. Okay? I'm not trying to say I know for a fact that, there's a conspiracy or anything. I'm just saying it's highly weird. I just find it really weird to write. It could be, maybe it is just, circumstantial at best. And maybe it is a coincidence. I don't really believe in coincidence, but doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So maybe it is a coincidence in this case that this guy dies in a single car accident right before the Fast and Furious report comes out. Who knows? I just think it's there hasn't been any other sheriffs getting killed or in accidents or anything, although multiple sheriffs getting killed in multiple car accidents or multiple strange coincidental deaths around the same period of time would probably send up a red flag. But I just thought it was interesting. So I wonder, it just makes one wonder if he knew anything. Maybe he didn't. Again, it might not be anything. I just find it really weird that somebody that was against the government and against their immigration policy, because see, if they didn't leave the southern border wide open, it would create a big problem for the drug cartels and the CIA, which you'll find out how that's connected to it too. So I just thought it was weird how this Arizona sheriff dies in a car wreck. Who knows? Might be nothing. Might be nothing at all. And then, of course, Brian Terry's father, and mother are a little pissed about how easy everybody in the DOJ got off. And rightfully so. Their son is dead. Did he die fighting terrorism? Did he die defending the Constitution? No, he died because of people inside of the federal government. And it was more than just guns. It was more than just an attack on the Second Amendment. That's included, but remember, these scumbags, all of them, no matter which party they belong to, which fictitious party they belong to, they all do things for multiple reasons. We'll be right back. Fast and Furious was about way more than just condemning the Second Amendment. All right, I want to educate people for a second. There's this misconception that Obama started Fast and Furious. He did not start the program. The program was started during the Bush administration. No, that is not liberal propaganda to take the heat off President Obama. That's the truth. See, people need to stop looking at this like, well, Bush was a good president, but Obama's a crappy president, and the next Republican, he'll be a good president. It's a game, okay? I have shown time and time again enough evidence, as well as all the other hosts on this network have covered this topic at least once on their shows, about how the two-party system we have here in the United States is fake, okay? They work for the same team. So stop thinking that, oh, that's just Obama trying to blame Bush, Yeah, because, yes, he does say, well, I was left a mess, and they use that as an excuse. It's more manipulation of the public opinion than anything else. But people buy into this crap, and then they start, he's just blaming Bush, and he's a crappy president. Let me tell you something. This thing is huge. It spans back into the Bush administration, and it's not just about guns. What does it always connect to, ladies and gentlemen? What's the one thing that seems to glue everything together, whether it's Pan Am Flight 103, whether it's insurgents in Fallujah, whether it's this case, Fast and Furious? What's the one, Mena, Arkansas, where the kids got killed on the train track, supposedly fell asleep on the train track from smoking pot and got run over by a train? What's the one thing that all those four cases, seemingly non-connected, right? What's the one thing that they all have in common? Drugs. And the CIA's illegal drug trade. That's what they have in common. The CIA smuggling drugs and dealing with drug cartels, whether it be in Mexico, whether it be in the Middle East. That's how the CIA makes their money for black ops. Drug running. This isn't a secret. It's to the point where it's almost pop culture-ish that it's known that the CIA runs drugs. I mean, I know people that don't believe that 9/11 was done any way differently than how the government tells you it was done. They don't even know that you could dump a ton of evidence on them, and they'll tell you, no, it's not real. You're just making that up, blah, 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 blah. They made comments about the CIA running drugs into this country. So even the asleep get it. It's almost been put into their like it's part of pop culture now, like I said. Okay? Don't believe me? I've played this clip before, but I'm going to play it again for people that maybe have never heard it or that are new listeners. Listen really quick. This is Ben Swan doing one of his reality checks on the Fox 19 up in, I think it's Ohio, he's in. And he explains exactly what I just said to you. So this isn't just me. You have someone that somebody consider, and I would consider to be a reputable source of information. The guy does really good investigative journalism. And listen what he has to say about what Fast and Furious was. I guarantee you it's going to sound very familiar to what I just said. Listen.
Well, the ATF gun runner and Fast and Furious operations, which spanned both the Bush and the Obama administrations, are two of the most stunning government operations to have come unraveled in years. Tonight, new and stunning accusations about Fast and Furious and why one high-ranking drug cartel official says Americans have it all wrong. Ben has the reality check you won't see anywhere else.
We've told you before that Justice Department memos obtained by CBS prove that the feds plan to use the numbers from Fast and Furious to push for stricter gun laws in the U.S. The attempt was to claim that the majority of guns headed into Mexico and being used by drug cartels were coming from the United States. But that is simply not true. Well, today, TheBlaze.com began reporting excerpts from a soon-to-be-released book titled The Weed That Just Won't Die by Reed Williams. Williams looks into federal documents surrounding the case of Jesus Vicente Zambada Nebla, known as the Sinaloa cartel's logistics coordinator. Now, this guy was extradited to Chicago last year to face federal drug charges. Now, before we get into all that, we should explain how the drug trade in Mexico worked prior to the start of this drug war. For decades, Mexican drug cartels existed independently of each other. They didn't work together, but they did stay out of each other's regions. So to understand, take a look at this map. These are the major cartels in Mexico. We'll start over here in this top corner. This is the Arellano Felix organization up here in orange. It has trade routes into Southern California through Tijuana, and it's a very profitable group. The Beltran Leyva organization is a less large cartel, but still pretty powerful. There's Los Zetas. That's this whole pink area right here. They are actually a paramilitary group created by our government. They were actually trained to take out cartel leaders, but went into Mexico and became a cartel of their own. Then you have the Gulf Cartel, who has been heavily at war with Los Zetas. Down here in the dark green, you have La Familia Michoacana. You have the Creo Fuentes organization. That's up here in this little purple one. They actually look like they would be the smallest territory, and land-wise they are. But they're actually one of the most powerful drug cartels in many ways because their routes go up through West Texas, through El Paso, and Ciudad Juarez. And finally, and this is very important to the story, is this light green right here. That is the territory of the Sinaloa cartel. Look, if you want to understand Mexico's drug war, then you have to understand how the Sinaloa cartel works. A man by the name of Joaquin Guzman, also known as Chapo Guzman, is the head of this cartel. In 2001, Guzman was being held in a Mexican prison. He actually escaped from that prison in a laundry truck. He went back and took control of the Sinaloa cartel. And when Guzman did, he began a war with all these other cartels across Mexico. The goal here, the attempt, was to create one super cartel by wiping out all of the competition. It has been long believed in Mexico that Joaquin Chapo Guzman got a lot of help. And that is the war that has been fought in Mexico heavily since 2006. So back to the Fast and Furious allegations here. The man making those claims, again, Zambada Nebla, is a close associate of Chapo Guzman and the Sinaloa cartel's logistics coordinator. Zambada Nebla claims that under a divide and conquer strategy, the U.S. helped finance and arm the Sinaloa cartel through Operation Fast and Furious in exchange for information that allowed the DEA, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and other federal agencies to take down rival drug cartels. The Sinaloa cartel was allegedly permitted to traffic massive amounts of drugs across the U.S. from 2004 to 2009. During both Fast and Furious and the Bush-era gun-running operations, as long as the intel kept coming. And there is more. Based on the alleged agreement, the Sinaloa cartel, under the leadership of the defendant's father, Ismael Zambada Nebla, and Chapo Guzman, were given carte blanche to continue smuggling tons of illicit drugs into Chicago and the rest of the United States. They were also protected by the United States government from arrest and prosecution in return for providing information against rival cartels, which helped Mexican and United States authorities capture or kill thousands of rival cartel members. States in Motion filed for discovery in United States District Court by Zambada Nebla's attorney in July of 2011. So what you need to know is that members of Congress from both parties should now say, look, let's demand to see everything, every single file connected to Fast and Furious and Operation Gunrunner. That means Republicans should not be focused only on the years when the Obama administration had control. Rather, go back to the beginning during the Bush administration. And Democrats, they should be demanding to see exactly what the ATF has been doing. Not just for the nearly 50,000 Mexican citizens who have died during this drug war, but for the thousands who are yet to die. And that is Reality Check.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So it wasn't just about Obama blaming the Second Amendment. That was part of it. But this goes back to the Bush administration. Now, What's a deeper connection that both these administrations have, along with other administrations? Oh, that's right. Black ops funded by CIA drug running. Now I'm starting to see the problem. Are you? We'll be right back. Or we're going to switch gears because going the last segment, not this segment, but next segment, which is the last segment of the first hour, and the most of the second hour, I'm going to play audio for you from a document. You could call it a documentary, but it was put together back in, I would say, like 2006, about mid 2006, maybe even closer to 2007. But it came out, and I've seen it on YouTube a few times. But it's one of those that it'll go up, and then there'll be issues with it. It won't play right. YouTube screws with it, or 6 different people will file copyright claims against it for whatever reason. The title of the video is called Iraq's Missing Billions. And the reason I want to play it is because there's this misconception in this country that it's okay to go to war with Syria or Iran or whoever else because, hey, we've already done it. Yeah, maybe back in the day things were different, but this is a post-9/11 world, right? We used to live in a pre-9/11 world. Now we live in a post-9/11 world. And even though the American public is fed up of war, and the controllers have to stage psyops and things to get you to accept more wars and more bombing and more invasions of different countries. I want to look back to the Iraq War because there were a lot of atrocities committed, and I've talked about that. I've played the IVAW clips from Iraq Veterans Against the War. I've done the Winter Soldier hearings on air before. I've played PFC John Needham's story. I've talked about the epidemic of rape in the military. But the one thing, even when Dr. Dalia Wasfi was on with me, we covered how the Iraqis got screwed and a lot of things that happened there. But I want people to hear. Now, this was put together by a British filmmaker. I believe they were working. It wasn't for the BBC, but I can't remember who they originally funded them to go in there and I guess do a documentary or whatever. But this was one of those things that it was aired, once or twice and then memory hold. Just like a lot of these other good, truthful documentaries that come out. They don't want that because it doesn't fit the propaganda party line, so it's got to go. And you're going to learn a few things about what happened and about how we raided the money. People have no idea how much money we stole from Iraq, from the people of Iraq. We took all their gold and then traded it in for American dollars. We said, well, we're going to take your gold. You can't have your gold, but we'll give you American dollars for it. So it's a great deal. But why, if I was in Iraq, I would have been like, why are you taking my money? That's the country's gold. But, we know how to do it better than you. But no, they hate us in the Middle East because of our freedom. It has nothing to do with how arrogant we've become and, invading people's countries and stealing all their wealth and all their minerals and oil and natural resources. No, it's got nothing to do with that. Bombing them, causing sectarian violence, causing civil wars, drone bombing. That's got nothing to do with it. They're just pissed at us because we're free. And because we have, American Idol and because we're all brainwashed morons who eat McDonald's, right? That's why they hate us, right? Sure. Check this out. This is a segue to it. From Courthouse News Service. Vet says his superiors tried to silence him. An Iraq war veteran claims in court that his superiors drugged and kidnapped him to keep him from telling the press about Abu Ghraib prison abuses, and that Saddam Hussein's still missing weapons of mass destruction were made in the USA. Ooh. Now, has the military ever been caught doing things like that before, kidnapping and detaining their own soldiers? Let me think. PFC John Needham? Anybody remember that story? If you don't, if you're a newer listener, go to federaljack.com, go to my archive section. It was a couple months back. Scroll down, you'll see it. It's from 2012. It's the story of PFC John Needham. Go listen to that and go listen to the Winter Soldier testimonies that I've played. This isn't some conspiracy, crazy vet. He's probably on drugs making these stories up. Our government would never do that. Wrong. The government does it quite often. And so does the military. Those are just two of the disturbing claims Frank Ford makes in a federal complaint, which mirrors a lawsuit he filed earlier this year in Sacramento Superior Court. His attorney said that the state complaint will be dismissed soon in favor of the federal case. So they're going to go they're going to go after him in the federal court system rather than in the state court system. In the federal complaint, Ford accuses the defendants, including the California Army National Guard, the United States of America, and fellow soldiers, and there's a bunch of different soldiers there, of violating the Constitution, the Whistleblower Protection Act, and of torture, false imprisonment, and medical malpractice. Gee, torture, false imprisonment, and medical malpractice. That sounds like the things that happened to John Needham. Same things that happened to him. And I just use his example because his case is a glaring example of this. Remember, I said what happens when you start to embrace the dark side. It swallows your soul. Combat vets know what I'm talking about. Even if you don't want to admit it, you guys hear this broadcast, you'll know what I'm talking about because you've seen the horrors of war. You've seen how evil men can be to one another. Once you embrace the darkness, it's over. And our so-called leaders back then, even Cheney admitted that, well, we're going to have to embrace the dark side a little bit. Yeah. You don't mind because you've got a robotic heart and don't really have a pulse to begin with, dick. Ford claims he served with the 203rd Military Intelligence Battalion through the California Army National Guard and went to Iraq as a counterintelligence non-commissioned officer in 2003. While in Iraq, he was under the command of the 205th Military Intelligence Brigade. He claims that in April 2003, and during the course of his duties as a counterintelligence agent, he personally observed weapons of mass destruction in Iraqi underground storage bunker at Balad Air Force Base, with markings on them indicating that they were manufactured in the United States of America. Not a big surprise. We all know that that's true. That's one of the reasons. Go listen to my interview with Doug Rocky from a couple weeks ago, where we talked about this, and go watch the movie Beyond Treason. You'll see they blew up multiple weapons depots. I think Doug said there were 105 of them. You have to go back and listen to the interview, but Camisea was one of them, and Camisea was the size of a couple football fields, and it was filled. I mean, absolutely filled with weapons, chemical munitions, and things like that, quote-unquote WMDs, weapons of mass destruction, that were bought from us and other allies. Mostly from us, though. And if it wasn't bought from us, we facilitated it. Why do you think we went in there and blew the shit out of Iraq in 91? It wasn't to free the Kuwaitis. We needed an excuse to go in there. Bush knew about that. Bush, Saddam Hussein, I forget her name, the ambassador, whatever she was at the time, to Iraq. Saddam told her that they were going to invade Kuwait. She told Bush, and George Bush told her to tell him, it ain't none of our business. And then as soon as he did it, Bush got, up there with his righteous indignation, and we're going to have to go kick some butt. It was about covering up what they did. That's why they didn't go in and take him out. I mean, it served multiple purposes. It brought them militarily and financially and economically, and even through the schooling and everything else. It brought the Iraqis to their knees. But this was also about covering up all the weapons of mass destruction that we had sold him during the Iran-Iraq war. History is much stranger than fiction, ladies and gentlemen. Much stranger. I was told by the defendant, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan, my commander, that we had unlimited funds available to pay our Iraqi sources who were operating in great danger at all times, Ford says in a second state court declaration. He claims in his federal complaint that his informant provided him with information that led to the capture of $40 million in United States currency and the currency of other countries. Plaintiff Ford turned this money over to his higher command later, or turned it over to his higher command. Later, when plaintiff Ford asked his higher command for money to pay his CI for information, confidential informant, the plaintiff was told that he would have to use his own money. Ford was informed and believes that the money he turned over was embezzled and used for personal use by United States military personnel. Obviously, his chain of command and whoever worked directly underneath them. Ford claims that when his informant told him he thought he knew the whereabouts of Saddam Hussein but was unable to deliver him to U.S. forces, things turned ugly for the man. On 2 occasions, he was severely beaten by United States personnel, and the plaintiff, Ford, cared for him as a trained corpsman. We are back. I tried to squeeze as much of that article as I could going right up to the break. So I just want to read you a little bit more, and then I'll get into the missing billions from Iraq. Ford claims that when his informant told him he thought he knew of the whereabouts of Saddam Hussein but was unable to deliver him to U.S. forces, things turned ugly for the man, meaning the confidential informant. On 2 occasions, he was severely beaten by United States personnel, and plaintiff cared for him as a trained corpsman. On the 3rd occasion, the plaintiff's CI was beaten. He died as a result of additional beating and torture, and the plaintiff, Ford, was unable to revive him. Ford says in his complaint, in his federal complaint, quote, this is Ford's attorney, Frank knows who beat the informant. It was members of his own unit. They were guys he worked with. Torture is a reoccurring theme in Ford's complaint. He says he was based at the now infamous Abu Ghraib prison. Allegations of human rights violations at the prison, including physical, psychological, and sexual abuse, torture, reports of rape and sodomy, and murder committed by U.S. military personnel, culminated in the removal of 17 soldiers and officers from duty. By 2006, 11 soldiers were convicted in court-martials, imprisoned, and dishonorably discharged for their roles in the abuse. Now, I want to add a little caveat to that. I'll post the full article up at Federal Jack, but this is just more, this guy's filing in court now, this veteran, to fight what he says he went through, what he was exposed to, what he witnessed. Good. We need more people coming out and admitting to this. I don't want to hear people say, oh, the guy's a bad vet for standing up and doing the right thing. No, he's doing what he's supposed to do. You're supposed to talk about this crap. This is garbage. This is why they don't like us. It's not because of our freaking freedom, which, by the way, since we lost since 9/11, I guess the terrorists should be happy. And now they should be moving on to Sweden or Switzerland or some freer country. Botswana, somebody that's got way more freedom than we do. Soviet Russia actually probably had more freedoms than we do right now. You just don't know it because you're too stupid, because you're too busy watching your stupid football game. You're watching America's Got Talent or Dancing with the Stars or some other brainless, mindless garbage. And I'm not referring right now to the people that are awake. I'm referring to the people that say that there aren't any problems and we were justified in going into Iraq. Wrong answer. There was no justification. I don't want to hear, well, he was a dictator. We have a dictator. Does that mean we should beg Australia or some other foreign country to invade us? Hey, Canada, you going to do drone strikes? I mean, really? How about if we used our own thinking and reversed it back on ourselves? Oh, well, then it's, Popeye, that's different. You can't look at, we're America. All these other countries that we attack, these people, they're better off after we go in anyway. No, they're not. No, they're not. They're not better off at all. Secret prisons, torture, rape, death, stealing all their natural resources, their country's money. Yeah, they're way better off. They're way better off. And technically, we did bring democracy to these countries. I'm tired of people saying we didn't bring democracy. We did bring democracy. Democracy means mob rule. So yeah, we brought democracy. If we really wanted to bring freedom, we would have helped them set up constitutional republics and help them write and author a constitution for themselves. Maybe modeled after ours, right? But no. We brought mob rule and chaos. So yeah, we did bring democracy to all these countries we've bombed. We really did, if you want to get technical. Here's Iraq's missing billions.
A square mile in central Baghdad seemed like hell on earth.
Almost 3 years ago, the British and American coalition, which had overthrown Saddam Hussein, was given a very special responsibility by the United Nations. It was given trusteeship of more than $20 billion, which belonged to the people of Iraq. Over the next 14 months, it spent almost all of it. Yet no one can account for where it all went. Literally billions of dollars have gone missing.
American law was suspended, Iraqi law was suspended, and Iraq basically became a free fraud zone. In a free fire zone, you can shoot at anybody you want. In a free fraud zone, you can steal anything you like.
Tonight on Dispatches, we reveal the fraud, incompetence and corruption, which is the Iraq money pit.
I think that as trustees of the Iraq assets, we did a very poor job. I think it was a failure. After all, it was their money. We should have spent it on the Iraqi people rather than sucking out of them and putting it in the pockets of foreign businesses.
I have to pause it for a second. We shouldn't have spent it on anything. I am going to correct you. We shouldn't have spent it on anything because we shouldn't have invaded that country to begin with. It wasn't our money to spend. We didn't have the right to spend a damn dime of it. So no, I don't agree with that statement. We should have spent it on this. No, we should have let the Iraqi people spend it. Well, Popeye, they're just dumb. They wouldn't have spent it on the right stuff. Really? How do you know? How do you know that? That's an assumption because you're assuming that you're, an American citizen is the top citizen in the world and everybody else is all ass backwards. And by the way, the reason Iraq was so screwed up when people went over there and soldiers would say, oh, well, Iraqi people are dumb. I know plenty of guys that say the Iraqis are stupid. They can't drive. They can't do this. They can't do that. It's because through the sanctions and the bombings from 91 until we invaded, we made them dumb. We wiped out literacy. Go listen to my interview with Dr. Dalia Wasfi. It's in my archive section on federaljack.com. Go listen to it. We wiped out their literacy, their schools. They couldn't even get proper nutrition. Kids can't learn when they're not getting proper nutrition to feed their brains and their body. We made them stupid. And yes, we, the citizens of this country, did it because, hey, he's a bad guy. We support war. We supported the troops. So yes, we're just as accountable as the scumbags that did this because we backed it. Whether willing or unwilling, it still happened on our watch. I'm not trying to pick on anybody. The best way to handle the situation is to admit there is a problem, and then let's rectify it. And the only way to be able to do that is for me to show you the information. I'm just fired up today. This is one thing that really pisses me off. Iraq was not a justified war. What we did to those people was not justified at all. No one will ever be able to justify it to me at all. I don't care how much gold paint you try to put on it, how much sugar you try to put on top of it, how much frosting with a big cherry on top and a red bow. I don't believe it because I know the truth.
And today, all across Iraq, ordinary people are paying the price of that failure.
They're trying to give oxygen to a baby, and they don't have a breathing mask. And the doctor says, I know it's primitive, but this is all we have. We don't have a breathing mask. And he's sitting there with an oxygen tube, and he's got the tube pressed against the baby's nose, and he's holding the nostril closed with his other finger, and he's trying to get the air into the baby. And the baby does not look healthy, by the way, at all. And no, it's not because he was born in Iraq. Maybe it's because he was born in Iraq after we'd used all the depleted uranium and blew everything up. But no, it wasn't because he was born in the Middle East. Iraq, actually, back in the day, their medical system was like the jewel of the Middle East. They actually performed the first open-heart surgery in Iraq, in the Middle East, in Iraq. So, yeah, those back-asswards Muslims over there. It's time for people to stop buying into this garbage propaganda. And if you want to see the video, it's called, the show it was on at the time was called Dispatches. I don't know if it's still on, if the show even exists anymore, or if it's still out there, but it was called Dispatches. And then the title of the video that you're going to hear the audio from is called Iraq's Missing Billions. If you guys want to look it up to see a visual, because I suggest you watch the video. Listen to the audio, but watch the video as well. You can go on YouTube and find it. It's there. When we come back, I'm going to get right into it. I'll bring this back in the second hour, and we're going to get right into it. Because I want to squeeze as much of the audio from this documentary into the second hour as I possibly can. The first step to fixing a problem is admitting there is a problem. I will pound this point home until people get it. I do not care. We're going to break. We'll be back in a few minutes. Don't go anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on today's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. It is September 23rd, 2012. I'm your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com. Remember, you can check my website out. It's updated with at least 1 or 2 new stories, usually even more. Sometimes I go crazy and put up like 20 or 30, at least once a day. And the archive section is always being updated every few days. Everything is right there, right on the right side, front of the website, federaljack.com. Check it out. All right, I want to get right back into what I was playing. Iraq's Missing Billions. Here we go.
Ali Fadil is an Iraqi doctor, but he's also a journalist who's won international awards for his dangerous work uncovering the truth about conditions in Iraq today. We asked him to investigate the human consequences of the coalition's failure to rebuild Iraq as promised. Ali and his family live in Baghdad. His daughter Sarah is just 3.
Sarah was born 4 days before Saddam fell. I think of her as the future of Iraq. But that future depends on Iraq being rebuilt. This was the promise made by the United States and Britain.
We will help them to restore basic services, such as electricity and water, and to build new schools, roads, and medical clinics.
Few things provide a better barometer of the state of a nation's health than the state of its health service. The coalition says it spent hundreds of millions of dollars on this. So we asked Ali to use his medical expertise to see what's been achieved. While dispatches went to the United States in search of the people who spent Iraq's money, Ali set off to look at reconstruction in one small area of Iraq.
They spent actually $527 million in a very small city in the south of Iraq called Diwaniyah. And I believe it's a good place to go and see. So we'll go to that city and see what the Americans have done so far.
Ali headed for Diwaniyah, 100 miles south of Baghdad, on one of the most dangerous roads in Iraq. Because of the danger, only an Iraqi could attempt this kind of investigation. But he'll be risking his life to do it.
I decided to visit Diwaniyah's only state pediatric and maternity hospital. The years of war, neglect by Saddam, and Western sanctions left this hospital in a terrible state. So the staff were very pleased when last year the Americans promised a $4 million refit. But with just a week to go before this part of the hospital opens, it's not looking very promising. The hospital manager has invited me to join an inspection tour, but the man representing the American contractor is not happy about me filming.
He says, please, why are they filming? Who are they filming for?
As we walk around, the problems are obvious. Outside, we can see an open manhole and sewage in the garden. And in the kitchen, more blocked sewage. Everywhere, the standard of work is terrible. New light fittings have melted. Pipes have not been connected. In the operating theater changing room, you can smell raw sewage.
There's raw sewage on the floor in the operating room of this quote-unquote brand new hospital. There's, refurbed hospital with all this money that we quote-unquote threw at it. That was the Iraqis, right? And you wouldn't even, this is stuff that makes the slums in Detroit look good. I'm not kidding. It's an operating room with feces and gray water on the floor, sewage, cockroaches, rust. That's the operating room floor. But, I guess that's acceptable because they're Iraqi, right? They're just Muslims. They're just dirty Middle Eastern people, so who gives a shit about them, right? Disgusting. Absolutely effing disgusting and unacceptable.
But there's one thing that to a doctor seems incredible. The flooring has been repaired so badly, it is now a potential killer.
And he's saying if the water gets underneath in the floor because it's a horrible hack job that they did to this place, that the water's going to puddle and get into the floor. It'll create mold and breed bacteria. You can't have that in a hospital.
I can even see ants crawling under the flooring, and this is in an operating theater that's going to be in use in a week's time. The man in charge of maintenance is in despair.
تعتبر الهاي كواليتي تجينا لانه من يجيك واحد على اساس انه.
So this is a hospital. I was expecting to receive high quality work.
جاي ينقذك جاي يريد بعد
When someone says he has come to save us from the misery we've been living,
ماشي فالمفروض يجيب لي فشي.
We expect him to do something useful.
يناسب على الاقل كمستشفى يعني.
Not just make a profit.
The American contractor told us that all the work had been done by Iraqi subcontractors, overseen by them and US government agencies. But for Iraqis, the real issue is this. The coalition had $23 billion of Iraq's own money. So what have they done with it? The money included proceeds from the sale of Iraq's oil under the United Nations Oil for Food program and seized Iraqi bank accounts. It was all put into a new fund run by the coalition, the so-called Development Fund for Iraq.
Any oil sales that were made in this period, those monies from those sales became part of the Development Fund for Iraq. All assets of the government, whether within the country or outside the country, were part of the Development Fund for Iraq.
The fund was turned into hard cash, stored by the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. From there, literally tons...
But no, there's nothing shady about that. They took the gold, they took the physical gold and replaced it with fiat paper, U.S. currency, and it was stored in the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. Nothing shady there, right?
Tons and tons of crisp $100 bills were transported to Andrews Air Force Base near Washington, then flown to Iraq. Over the first 14 months of the occupation, 363 tons of $100 bills were flown in. That's $12 billion. in cash.
Iraq was awash in cash, in dollar bills, US dollars. Piles and piles of money.
The CPA, or Coalition Provisional Authority, ran Iraq during that period, and they were in charge of the Iraqi money. But who ran the CPA? Officially, it was the Coalition of the Willing, including the UK. The reality was very different. The American State Department had prepared plans for the post-war rebuilding of Iraq, but the Bush administration swept those plans aside. Instead, power was handed to the people in this building. The Pentagon. The military, the people who run wars, not countries, were put in charge of nation building. The Pentagon's man in Iraq was American Ambassador L. Paul Bremer III, and he immediately put his stamp on the new regime. He said US contractors were not subject to Iraqi law.
He gave them immunity from prosecution or even collection actions under Iraqi law. So American law was suspended, Iraqi law was suspended.
Nothing shady there, right? It's all for the good of the people. Take their money, break their laws, but we know better, right? Wrong. Epically wrong.
And Iraq basically became a free fraud zone. In a free fraud zone, you can steal anything you like. And that was what they did.
Frank Willis was one of Bremer's top officials. He was a senior member of the Coalition Provisional Authority and effectively in charge of all civil aviation in occupied Iraq. He's agreed to speak out about the Iraq money pit and how it worked.
Contracts were negotiated fast and furiously. Sums were paid. Contractors went about their business, but there was very poor oversight of the performance in those contracts. There was a lack of personnel on our part, and there was a lack of trained personnel on our part to provide an effective supervising function.
In an atmosphere of chaos, fantastic sums of money were stashed by the Americans in Saddam's captured palace. Bags of cash were handed out daily.
We were known to have played football with some of the bricks of $100 bills. Before delivery, it was a Wild West crazy atmosphere, the likes of which none of us had ever experienced.
Security was incredibly lax. From one vault, $750,000 was stolen. Another safe was left open. In one case, 2 American agents left Iraq without accounting for nearly $1.5 million.
When you have cash, it stands to reason that you're not going to be able to trace in the same kind of way. It's why a lot of dirty deals are done in cash.
As word spread of the deals to be done in Iraq, contractors from around the world began to congregate. Some were reputable, some were not.
It attracted soldiers of fortune and people who went to Iraq in order to make a buck. These were people who had no interest in fostering democracy in Iraq. They had no interest even in carrying out their instructions from the U.S. military. What they were interested in was in simply making a profit. They saw their opportunity and they went for it. And these are the people who we know as the war profiteers.
The profiteers were on their way, and the Iraqi people were about to pay the price. From the early days of the occupation in 2003, Iraq was awash with dollars and with promises of a new tomorrow.
$18.4 billion to the people of Iraq to rebuild the country.
Putting money into essential services like health care.
The budget for 2003 would be somewhere between $600 million and $800 million.
Money is flowing back into the healthcare system.
So what happened to all those promises? Dr. Ali Fadil is in a pediatric and maternity hospital in Diwania trying to find out.
This hospital has just had a $4 million refurbishment. But where did all that money go? Not on vital medical equipment.
أنا أول واحد بالكانيولات بس هذه الشبيرة الكانيولا هذا أكثر شيء نعاني منه طبعا بالمناسبة يعني.
The problem that the doctor's talking about with the baby is he's trying to put a needle into the kid's arm, and they have the wrong size needle. They need a small one. He's a baby. He's got small veins, and they only have like large, like 14 gauge needles. They don't have the proper stuff. Over $4 million was spent to quote unquote upgrade this hospital, and it is a shit heap.
It's a constant stream of children from Diwania with severe diarrhea and dehydration. To rehydrate them, special fine drip needles, cannulas, are needed. This is a basic piece of equipment, very cheap. But an infant like this needs the very smallest of needles, and the hospital has none. Her mother has brought her here in desperation after another hospital spent 3 days trying unsuccessfully to get a large cannula into her.
And by the way, the reason why the kids get sick, right, because they're smaller, their immune systems aren't up to par. The adults get sick too, but the kids get sick faster. And why are they dehydrated? Because they don't have fresh running water. And why don't they have fresh running water? Oh, because we bombed the hell out of their water treatment facilities, or we shot them up. Oh yeah, go look it up. But this was all Saddam's fault, right?
هسه أنا وهذا راح نبقى بحيرة. لو أنا وخبرتي لو هذا ما حصل.
It's all too much for the mother who's watched her child suffer unnecessarily for so long.
So how come after 3 years of occupation and billions of dollars of spending, hospitals are still short of basic supplies? Health experts who were in Iraq in the first weeks of the occupation say the mistakes were made from the start. This laid the basis for today's problems in Diwania.
What we should have done is help to flood the country with simple equipment. The simple basics is what you need, including the management systems to know what you have and what you don't have. And those are the things that we didn't do. We went more for big-ticket, showy items that you could splash around for symbolic value than some of these less attractive but more important substantive things that make all the difference between life and death in an emergency room.
And don't think that was done by mistake either.
The first international health professionals sent in to rebuild Iraq's health service felt there were already good foundations.
Iraq had a very reasonable primary health care system. They had experts. I worked with some of them. They very clearly knew what needed to be done. If we had engaged with them and worked with them, I think we would have been much farther along now, because they understood, as we could not, their own healthcare system and what was needed.
But Coalition Provisional Authority boss Paul Bremer had a different blueprint for the Pentagon's new Iraq. Every official with links to the old regime was to go. It was called de-Baathification, but it was indiscriminate. So, along with Saddam's stooges and placemen, Bremer cleared out most of the people needed to run the health system.
We had no typewriters, no desk, no nothing anymore. But we had...
No, I'm going to pause it there for a second. They cleaned out the health system. They sat down and cleaned it out. You don't think that was planned? You think that, oh, we're just de-Baathification. They knew. When they say, oh, we didn't realize what we were doing. Oh, that's a lie. Yeah, some of it they didn't know what they were doing. But they knew, they were told by their advisors that the de-Baathification, quote unquote, the Ba'ath Party, taking all those people that were sympathetic to the Ba'ath Party out of power, no matter where they were, lawyers, doctors, teachers, they were told by their advisors that was a horrible, horrific idea, and that would lead the country into sectarian violence and civil war. But they did it anyway, because they don't care. They didn't go there to help these people. We didn't go there to help them and save them. That's not what this was about.
left one kind of asset, which was the people who were there to run the health system. They were still there. And so then to fire those very people is obviously doesn't make sense, because you can replace them, but you lose time in replacing them and training them.
Doesn't make sense. Well, it doesn't make sense if you're trying to bring freedom, right? Or quote-unquote democracy to somebody. But it certainly makes sense if you're trying to destroy a country and forever change it. We didn't go there to help, ladies and gentlemen. It wasn't justified. And all those people, ours and theirs, died in vain.
Dr. Ali Fadil was working in Baghdad Medical City at the time. He saw firsthand the effects of debathification.
We lost a very, very, very intelligent and professional doctor because of a silly and idiot policy of getting rid of the Ba'athist at the very, very beginning, which was, totally wrong. He's just a doctor, he's just a physician. And he would, at least if he was there, and if he's still there, he would save a lot of lives.
To head the reconstruction of the Iraqi health service, the Pentagon appointed a health administrator from Michigan, James Haberman.
I went to Iraq as a senior advisor. My role is to advise Ambassador Bremer on healthcare issues, but also to work with the Ministry of Health to make sure that it's strong.
Haberman had little international health experience, but he was a prominent Bush supporter.
He was appropriate as a political advisor because he had the trust of senior leadership in the Pentagon who related to the reconstruction of Iraq. He had the political qualifications, but not the technical ones. And he was a highly moral, religious individual, and he fit with the profile of many of the people who were in senior administration.
I happened to vote Republican. I happened to support George W. Bush as president and his policies. And I did some consulting once for Jeb Bush during the transition from one term to another. That all looks like pretty good credentials to me. And that's just who I am.
There were lots of people with much more experience of developing health internationally, with dealing with post-conflict situations. You hadn't had any experience in that.
I didn't deal with post-conflict situations. What's unique about a post-conflict situation? What's unique about a pre-conflict situation? What's unique about managing healthcare in Michigan? I think you got to have the skill and the ability. I happen to be a social worker by training. I happen to understand health. I manage the healthcare.
That's a straw man argument. There's a huge difference between managing healthcare here in the United States and managing healthcare post-invasion of Iraq, where water treatment facilities were blown up and attacked. Hospitals were blown up. There's not proper running water or even electricity. The basic needs aren't being met, and that's why they're coming down and why these people were getting sick with a lot of these basic, simple diseases that should have been preventable. So that's a straw man argument. Well, there's really not a big difference. That liar. Absolute liar.
System for Michigan for 10 million people. I don't even know why I'm trying to defend this, because I think I got the ability to do it. And I think the president and people who interviewed me at the Pentagon and the State Department and elsewhere thought I had the skills as well.
Critics claim that people were given important jobs not because they were the best qualified, but because of their political connections.
I believe it had a lot to do with showing that the U.S. was in control. And I believe that it had to do with rewarding people that were politically loyal. So rather than being a technical agenda, I believe it was largely a politically motivated reward and punishment kind of agenda.
That sounds very like the way Saddam ran the country.
If you were to interview Iraqis today about what they see day to day, I think they will tell you that they don't see a lot of difference.
Back on the road, Ali is continuing his investigation of the failures in rebuilding Iraq's essential services. He's trying to find out why so many children are suffering from diarrhea and dehydration.
A member of the city council took me on a tour to neighborhoods where there are no schools, no domestic water supplies, and sewage in the street.
And so you understand, there's like a stream. They're walking down the street, and in the middle of the street is this stream of just raw sewage, water with piss, water with fecal matter in it, which is poop, in case you people don't know what that is. Human waste in the middle of the street. And there's people walking by every day. This is getting kicked up in the dust. They're inhaling it. You wonder why there was so many issues. And then our soldiers would go over there, and you talk to anybody that was in Iraq, they'll tell you, oh, it was disgusting. There was sewage in the streets, this, that, the other thing. A lot of them don't get the bigger picture that we caused so much damage to that place that's why it's like that.
The U.S. Ambassador for Reconstruction says Diwaniyah has benefited from a $500 million reconstruction program, but I can see little evidence of it.
Says nobody cares or listens to us. Nobody cares about our demands, even though it's winter now. And I guess in the Middle East, it's I'm not really sure what the winter season is like in Iraq, but I'm assuming that it's hotter over there, or it breeds certain types of things, just like in different types of the United States, there's different types of weather. And he's talking about huge mosquitoes and bugs just filling the rooms because of the fecal matter and piss in the streets right outside their front doors and their windows.
I was told that a U.S. company was paid nearly $3 million to rebuild Diwaniyah's sewage works. Yet the plant is still not working because power cables have not been laid. So sewage goes into the river untreated, polluting drinking water downstream.
The United States says it spent billions on Iraq's essential services. Yet according to its own latest figures, they're worse than before the war. They're generating less electricity, yet $1.5 billion has been spent on it.
$1.5 billion, yet they're generating less electricity than before we invaded. But we brought them freedom. We changed their way of life. Yeah, we certainly changed their way of life. Just not the way you think we did.
They're producing less oil, yet $500 million has been spent on that too. They're supplying less clean water, yet another $500 million has been spent.
Back in the hospital, an anxious father fears his child may have meningitis. As so often in the desperate situation of Diwaniyah, angry parents turn on the doctors.
أريد مستشفى ابني يتمرض أجيب المستشفى تعبانة هي تجيب له مرض كبيرة مو أنا إحنا طبق.
He's saying, I want a good hospital, not one that makes my child worse than when I brought them in. And he said, I'm not blaming you. We are the same class. He's talking to one of the doctors. I'm talking about the important people, those controlling. All the millions in the oil. They didn't come here to save us from Saddam. They came here for the oil. So now the oil is stolen, and we got nothing from it. But no, they were attacking our soldiers, and when it was actually legitimate Iraqis that were pissed off attacking our guys, not false flag type stuff or stage stuff or people that actually worked for Mossad or the CIA or whoever when it really was pissed off Iraqis attacking our guys. Well, I wonder why they were mad. Oh, they're ungrateful bastards. Yeah. Gee, I wonder why they're ungrateful.
But at least I was able to tell the family that their child did not have meningitis. She had a complication arising from fever and dehydration, probably caused by bad sanitation.
The money that should have helped those people was entrusted to the coalition by the United Nations. But official auditors have not been able to discover where it all went.
Gee, big surprise. Oil for food scandal. Remember that? Oh, that's right, you don't, because that got swept under the rug. All that money gone. They keep taking the one big key thing that you see reoccurring is tons of money disappears and there's no accounting for it. We'll be right back.
Now, investigations by the Special Inspector General for Iraqi Reconstruction are leading to arrests. But the inspectors have struggled to get at the truth about the Coalition Provisional Authority and the Development Fund for Iraq.
There were less than adequate internal controls in many cases. Very often we found that contracts were missing, that the individuals who were responsible for them had short terms and they had left and turned it over to someone else. And so we had a very difficult time actually trying to make sure that all the money was accounted for.
It was a climate which practically invited exploitation. The largest single recipient of Iraq's money was American energy company Halliburton, formerly led by US Vice President Dick Cheney. They received $1.6 billion of Iraqi money to help reinstate the country's oil supply. Auditors said $177 million were overcharged. Although Halliburton continues to deny this, it recently reached a settlement with the US government to repay $9 million. But while some companies may have overcharged, others went far further. Scott Custer and former Republican candidate Mike Battles were about to fleece Iraqi funds of millions of dollars. One man who worked with them until he realized what they were up to was Bob Isaacson.
Their background was impeccable. They were military officers, CIA. One of them had run for the United States Congress. They were recommended by very high-level U.S. government officials as being honest individuals.
Today, lawyer Alan Grayson is working with Bob Isaacson to recover money from Custer Battles, using a U.S. law which allows Isaacson to share some of it.
These were people who went over to Iraq without any presence there, without any employees there, without equipment, without facilities, without any tangible qualifications, and without any money.
They had no money. Scott Custer, from what I'm told by my men, could not pay the $15 or the $20 to get out of the Jordanian airport, the immigration fee.
Almost immediately, Custer Battles landed a $15 million contract to provide security for civilian flights at Baghdad airport. But the flights never happened, so Custer Battles carried out other security duties. Frank Willis didn't hire them, but as the coalition's head of civil aviation, he did have to pay them.
$2 million was due on the 1st of August. We went down to the vault, got the $2 million in crisp new $100 bills. They were shrink-wrapped in $100,000 amounts. We called the representative of Custer Battles and said, come on up and get your payment, bring a gunny sack. We've got your money ready for you.
Meanwhile, from their base in Baghdad airport, Custer and Battles were determined to expand their empire. And their next big chance was this: Iraq's money exchange program, known as the ICE project. It was a classic coalition exercise. They couldn't get desperately needed drugs to hospitals, but they would cheerfully devote enormous resources to replacing dinars showing Saddam's face with ones that didn't.
The logistical challenge involved with this currency exchange
is enormous. The amount of cash is something like over 2,200 tons of bills. It's an enormous challenge. It is something that we believe is another sign that the reconstruction is on track.
Custer Battles won a contract which would pay them their costs plus 25%. But they wanted far more than that, as one of their associates explains to Bob Isaacson.
We said that, oh no, we can make dramatically more money than that. I said, well, what are you talking? How could you possibly do that?
The associate explained that they would simply create false companies to put in exaggerated bills for costs, which would be passed on to the Americans.
I said, listen, I'm not going to do that. That's illegal. We're not going to be involved. We don't get involved in that kind of stuff. We ain't going to be involved. And it's criminal.
Custer Battles went ahead anyway.
They simply made up invoices from the companies that they controlled for numbers that were wildly different from what their actual expenses were. And they handed in those invoices in lieu of the real invoices.
For a new helipad, Custer Battles got another company to do the work, then charged a profit of more than 60% on top. And they rented to the coalition forklift trucks that were not even theirs.
That were Iraqi Airways property that had been abandoned. They painted them over so that no one would recognize them as Iraqi Airways forklifts, and Custer Battles then turned around and leased them to the government for $108,000 over 4 months alone.
But then Custer Battles made an extraordinary mistake. They left a devastatingly incriminating document in a CPA meeting room. Grayson has a copy.
So this is what he left behind. It's the spreadsheet as of August 20th of 2003. It lists various columns. This is what Custer Battles actually spent. This is what they invoiced to the government for the same items. 5-ton truck. Actual cost, $240,000 for 12 of them. Invoiced cost, $600,000. Filing cabinets. Actual cost, $0. Evidently because they found them abandoned at Baghdad International Airport. Invoiced cost, $200. Hand trucks, 12 of them. Actual cost, $480. Invoiced cost, $4,800. That's a 1,000% markup. And on and on and on for page after page after page until you reach the end and you see that $3 million of expenses under a time and materials contract turned into a horrific $10 million in billings to the government.
But perhaps the most extraordinary thing is this. Despite the evidence, the US government has taken no legal action to recover the money.
And yet they continued this contract. They allowed Custer Battles to keep working and to receive other contracts. They took no action to prevent that for almost a year.
What they have to gain from not prosecuting these people?
The government in the United States wants to foster the view that things are going well in Iraq. Coming down hard on war profiteers is inconsistent with that goal. If you're a war profiteer in Iraq, crime does pay.
In Diwania, Dr. Ali Fadil is finding that the problem is not crime, but a lack of basic equipment.
This is a maternity hospital, yet the neonatal care unit is desperately short of proper facilities. There are only 14 incubators, and they are old, made in the 70s. Most are broken, doors held in place by wires and tubes, and even plasters. This is unhygienic. They should be sealed to keep out germs.
جاي نخلي بها أكثر من طفل يعني 2 أو 3 بالحاضنة الوحدة لأن ماكو هنا 13.
He's saying that since they only have 14 incubators, they have to put the children in sometimes 2 and 3 at a clip inside of an incubator. You're not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be 1 child per incubator if you use an incubator.
حاضنة عندنا مرات يصير الدخول 20 طفل أو 25 أو أكثر.
Staff here feel angry, but they also feel betrayed. The coalition says it spent hundreds of millions of dollars on health, yet still babies suffer unnecessarily for lack of basic equipment. The coalition says security problems have slowed down progress in rebuilding Iraq. The climate of violence makes everyone nervous.
I'm going to stop it right there. You can go see the rest of the video. I have a link for it on, if you go to the Truth Movie section on federaljack.com, it's called Iraq's Missing Billions. It's listed under the Iraq War section. And just go on YouTube, type in Iraq's Missing Billions. And I saw it in the chat room earlier. So you can go back in the chat history and check it out there. There's multiple ways to watch the video. I suggest you go listen to the whole thing, watch the whole thing from beginning to end, because there's at least about another about 17, 18 minutes that I'm not going to have enough time to play, obviously. So go watch the whole video, and you obviously, when you see the visual, it'll give the audio, it'll make it that much more of an impact on you, and you'll see. This wasn't justified, what we did. What we did was horrible. If anybody did it to us, we'd be up in arms. We'd be pissed off. It's time to just own up to what happened. Again, as I said before, the first step to fixing a problem is admitting there's one to begin with. And we have to stop throwing Band-Aids on the symptoms of the problem, because we don't want to face the real problem, because the symptoms are easier to deal with than the problem itself. No, wrong. Let's just face the fact that it was wrong. That's the first step. When people say that the people in Iraq, when I hear people here in America say the people in Iraq are ungrateful, I just shake my head at them. So ignorant. The arrogance to even think that. Do your research before you buy into that propaganda garbage. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. Thank you for tuning in today. I'll see you all again Wednesday. I got Glenn from We Are Change, New Jersey coming on. Until then, I love you all. I'm out of here.